want to say hello to everyone and welcome you to another episode of SERA Spotlight, the official podcast of the Sayreville Economic and Redevelopment Agency. I'm your host, John Zebrowski, Chairman of SERA. And today's episode focuses on something every resident and business depends on each and every day: reliable electric service and the infrastructure that powers our community. As Sayreville continues to grow through development, new housing, businesses, and waterfront opportunities, our infrastructure becomes interesting, important, and increasing in planning for the future. Joining us today are representatives from Jersey Central Power and Light to discuss power reliability, storm preparedness, infrastructure development, and how utilities and municipalities work together to support residents and future growth. And we appreciate JCP&L taking the time to join us for this important conversation. Well, I've already said that this is probably one of the more exciting podcasts that I get to do as chairman of SERA, particularly because it's an issue that I think is always at the tip of the tongue of our residents, and that is utilities, particularly electricity. And whether it's a national issue, state issue, or local issue right now, everybody's talking about electricity. So I'm so glad that we're having Kieran Tintle, who is the Customer and Government Affairs for JCP&L, here with us today to discuss those issues that might be at the tip of everybody's tongue, but also some of the longer term issues of how JCP&L is addressing electricity, right, for the future. So, Kieran, thank you for being here.
Of course, Councilman. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's an exciting time in the industry. To your point, it is on the tip of everyone's tongue. One of the things that we're trying to get out and do as a team, as a company here, is educate our customers. So really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate in this podcast and hopefully get some messages out to the communities we serve.
Well, we love to do that. As most of our residents do know, that this relationship was not always terrific. It wasn't always collaborative. Over the last several months, however, maybe last year, there's been a lot of collaboration between JCP&L and Sayreville in order to bring each of us closer together to get a lot of exciting things done for our town. I do want to say at the outset that I want to say a thank you to your representative and our representative from Sayreville, Jose Ortiz, who has really made that collaboration come together with one of our local residents, Andy Ozog, who is our mayor's assistant as well. And that really precipitated a relationship that brings us here today.
I couldn't agree with you more. We need to acknowledge where we were in the past. I'm more excited about what we're going to be talking about what's going on now and in the future. But I think what you're getting from us is a completely different company. Our leadership has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. We have new executives across the board. And with that, our focus has changed. Also, our ability to be responsive to our customers has changed. So now with the reorganization, we have local control here in New Jersey as JCP&L, led by our president, Doug McCoy. And with that, our team has been stood up to go out and develop these relationships. And it's not about, hey, my name, I know your name. It's about solving the problems. It's about making you feel comfortable to pick up the phone and solve those problems. So I'm delighted, but not surprised to hear that things have been going really well with Jose. And we want to keep moving that ball down the field.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, we did have some issues, particularly with streetlights, and then particularly with a substation and some power outages over the last several years. And it did create, I think, tough feelings from members of the council, but certainly from the residents, and we heard a lot from that. But so let's dive into. I was going to actually start talking about an overall perspective, but let's dive into the issues on the local level that you've been addressing. And let's first start with streetlights.
Yes. So first and foremost with streetlights, we don't just know that a streetlight is out. A customer would need to report them. Municipality would need to report them. I think this is a great example of a public-private partnership and collaboration, frankly, here in Sayreville, with your OEM, your police force, really thinking outside the box and coming up with a mechanism to do some of that work for your residents, your constituents, and our customers. It's definitely streamlined things on our end. We're getting regular reports from your police department. We know exact pole locations. We're getting clarity in the information provided. And so we've been addressing those streetlights expeditiously. And I do think that, it's been noticed by our customers. There are, of course, every day that we fix one, a couple may go out. So we ask customers to please continue to report those streetlights, and really want to thank this administration, this municipality, specifically your OEM police force, for that partnership. It's helped us fix a lot. Related to your parks, it is that time of year where we're going to be outside a lot longer. The weather's getting a little bit better. We've been working very hard. War Memorial, I believe we're complete with our work out there. We're almost done at Veterans, and Kennedy Park will be up next.
That's great to hear. And one of the other issues that came up was we had a substation, which I know was an older substation that there was a fire several years ago. And for quite some time, we had a temporary substation stood up. But it's my understanding that's all been repaired and we're good to go.
That's correct. So there was an issue out at that substation. In the interim, while we worked to fix it, we do have the ability to move around mobile substations. As you mentioned, they operate the same way a substation that's sitting on a pad, within the fence would, but they're on a trailer. So it provides us that flexibility. That's exactly what they're designed for, to plug in those circumstances until we can either get the substation repaired, build that new substation, et cetera.
Now, let me ask you this question, and we probably know the answer, given that sometimes it's difficult to get parts manufactured these days. But was the delay in the substation, or standing up our old substation, getting that back up and running, what was this delay related to that? Because a lot of residents say, well, that's been there a long time.
In terms of specifics, I might need to follow up. I'll say generally, yes, supply chain has been problematic for the industry, not just for JCP&L over the last few years. We're seeing some breaks in that in recent time. But when we're talking about the type of work that went into that substation specifically, it's not so simple as changing switching a fuse in your breaker. There's significant engineering studies that need to be taken on, safety concerns that need to be accounted for. So it may seem like things are moving slowly at times, but things are moving the way that they're supposed to be in order to keep the safety and integrity of the system intact.
Appreciate it. So I want to get back to what was going to be my original discussion, is tell us how or what JCP&L does and how big it may be. And you mentioned that there's been a change in leadership and that there's been more local involvement. From my understanding, JCP&L is a large company. It's part of First Energy.
That's correct.
But there are some other towns that have PSNG. They have other utilities. Tell me about where JCP&L is at and how big it is and all the work that it's been doing.
So JCP&L operates in the northwestern portion of the state, and then, if you believe in central New Jersey, the central eastern portion of the state. Monmouth, Ocean, Middlesex, Mercer, and Burlington, and then your Sussex, Warren, Somerset, Morris, pieces of Essex, Passaic, up north. Our job is to keep the lights on for 1.2 million customers in the state of New Jersey. By landmass, we have the largest utility by landmass in the state. Some may have more customers than us. That presents a lot of challenges along the way, right? If you think of an urban environment where you might have 100 meters in one building, we may have 100 meters spread out across 50 miles, right? So it presents some challenges that are unique to us in the mountainous terrain up north, vegetation issues, off right-of-way trees, that sort of thing. But our focus remains on the customer. And I think that's been the biggest change in what we've felt at JCP&L as an employee is, when this new leadership came in, we're not thinking about things from a return standpoint or anything like that. We're thinking about the investments that we're making from a customer experience standpoint. How many times did this customer have no power last year? For how long did they have no power last year? And we're starting to make our decision, or not starting, we have been, I should say, making our decisions based upon that. Where are our worst performing circuits? And, we're going to work from the ground up on that sort of thing.
So with that said, I think a lot of several residents are going to say, we must be in that area where there's the worst performing circuits. And I don't know if that to be the case or not, but we've had our share of power outages throughout, particularly the last several years. Tell us what JCP&L is doing on an overall basis, but also on a local basis to be able to do, as you said, be able to represent the customer or our residents better.
Absolutely. So we recently completed upgrades to 2 lines.
Well, is that a feeder to?
Yes. So the way it works, and you can kind of think about it like waters is typically an analogy that I use because people understand. You see the big water mains under our roads, and they're massive, right? And they're pressurized when they're full. So that thing's full of water. And then you look at the little water line that comes into your house, the 3/4 inch, 1 inch pipe, right? So you have your transmission lines, which are essentially those big water mains that are moving that bulk power from point A to point B being a substation like the E.H. Warner substation. And then from there, you have distribution circuits that spider out, and that's what's feeding all the homes and businesses. So E.H. Warner is a pretty critical piece of infrastructure in the area. It provides power not just to Sayreville, but to the surrounding communities as well. So we recently completed upgrades to 2 of the lines going there. We are mobilizing for a 3rd feed at that, or upgrading a 3rd feed, our South River projects, which we're excited about. This area, you had mentioned some folks have PS, some folks have JCP&L. We do abut one another in franchise territory here. There's also a lot of development going on here. There's also, believe it or not, a lot of generation in this geographic location of the state. So when you think about that, that makes ever more the investments in transmission so important. And yes, it does lead to more reliability. It leads for more capability in switching, automation. All those things go together as one cohesive unit. But without having that strong backbone of transmission, we could do all the work we want on the distribution ends. If that's not strong, then we're going to fail and lights are going to be out. We have to get that where it needs to be.
And I think I know in some degree how you're doing that on a local level, because some of our folks have called and said, hey, I'm seeing new poles going up, and they're larger, I guess in width and diameter and as well as length, and they're of a different material. And they always question, is that foretelling something else, or is it simply JCP&L addressing that need?
No, I think what you're talking about is, you'll periodically we'll come around and maybe we'll change some poles out or we'll reconductor. And this is all typical maintenance or ongoing maintenance that a utility would take on. Times have changed. So in 2026, poles last a very long time. So some of these circuits, those poles have been out there for quite a while, for decades, and times have changed. The frequency and the severity of the storms that we've been experiencing have forced us as an industry to take another look at how we're doing things. And so I know you don't think of a wood pole as being, quote unquote, new technology, but the way that they're building them, it's true. They still need to be vulnerable enough that if a car should hit them, they can break away, right? We got to save that life. At the same time, we need to make sure that if we get the same types of winds that we experience in Storm Sandy, Irene, Riley, Quinn, you name it, that the integrity of the pole remains intact. So long way of saying we are upgrading our infrastructure. Certainly, there are some areas where capacity is on the mind. We need more capacity. We're talking about redevelopment, and this area is no stranger. I know a lot of warehousing and things like that going on throughout the state, some with refrigeration. But more often than not, it's simply us doing routine maintenance and upgrading a pole that's at the end of its lifespan with a new pole, a stronger pole, a pole that's ready for the future.
Okay. So you did mention redevelopment, and as part of redevelopment, SERA is usually at the tip of the spear for that. But we're asked often that, well, or do you take energy or electricity into consideration when a development is being proposed? And the answer to that is yes. And it happens not just at SERA, but it happens at the planning board of adjustment, and what have you. But I ask you to kind of explain how that works, because the paramount to someone's mind is, well, new development, that means that energy is going to be much more scarce and we're going to have a power outage.
So with any project, big or small, when we're talking about interconnection, it could be interconnection of a distributed energy resource like that, or your solar, or interconnection of a new residential home, taking power, commercial business. Everything goes through an engineering study, right? If I'm putting a second story on my one-story ranch house and I'm going to add another air conditioner compressor, JCP&L needs to know that when I apply to upgrade my service, so they can look at the transformer that's feeding my home and ensure there's capacity. On a much grander scale, some of these new refrigerated warehouses, businesses, residential complexes, it's no different. There is a very stringent engineering review process that goes on. At times, we need to make upgrades just to be able to accommodate. That's not something that's borne by our ratepayer. There's a system in place where that customer who's asking for it would pay for it up front. And then periodically, as long as they're utilizing what they said they were going to use in the form of kilowatt hours, they'll get some of that money refunded to them. But we evaluate and do engineering studies on any and all interconnections, because at the end of the day, the safety and reliability of the grid is our number one responsibility.
So if a large development was proposed, I would say approval would be contingent upon JCP&L reviewing that and ensuring that there is capacity.
That is absolutely correct. And if there's not capacity, we can build anything. It takes time and it takes money to build it. But if there's not capacity, we're going to let the customer know that there's not capacity.
You talked earlier about the storms, and Sayreville has been, unfortunately, it has been at the brunt of a number of those storms, including Superstorm Sandy. So all our residents are always wary when the weather report comes out and says, "Oh, bad weather is coming up." Tell us about the notification process. Well, even before the notification process, what does JCP&L do to prepare its staff and in order for there to be a response should there need to be one?
A number of different things. This is a time where I think our company really shines, is in storms, in the preparation, in the execution, and even in the closing out of storms. So depending on severity, we have 2 meteorologists on staff full time. They're not selling ad space, so they give us the best weather updates possible, right? They're not trying to get us to be glued to the TV. So we'll get that. And we use some systems that do some modeling based on the predicted winds, what the humidity level is, takes all that into account. And we'll get an idea of approximately how many customers we might expect, where the impact zones might be, all subject, right? Things shift as the storm moves in, but they monitor up to the minute and right on through. And if we have to, we'll call in contract crews. We'll call for mutual assistance from some of the other utilities throughout the country. We do the same when they need it. So we pre-stage. That's the most important thing in terms of field work. At the same time, myself and my team, we're reaching out to our municipal partners, to our legislative partners, to our partners at the state, letting them know what we're seeing from a weather perspective. Give them a heads up on manpower. How many crews do we have on property now? How many crews are we expecting in the future? There comes a time in these storms where you do have to weigh, is it better to bring crews in before the storm and stage them, or let the storm ride through, maybe keep them 50 miles away safe in Pennsylvania and New York, and then bring them in after, right? If you have crews here, huge weather event happens, and those bucket trucks get damaged, this, that, or the other. So all these things we take into account. But my team will be reaching out to our OEMs, making sure that they know that we're, activated if we've activated the FEMA ICS process, making sure that if, an OEM director or mayor is on vacation, we know who that backup person is. We do try to keep it, a one-to-one contact in those storm situations for efficiency purposes, and then getting as much accurate information out the door as we can from there. So we like to make sure that our customers are prepared. Have your phones charged. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, tell us what's the message you would give to an average resident who in storm preparation. What are the things that they should be checking off their list?
Think ahead about what uses electric in your house. I don't have a generator in my house. My basement's prone to flooding. I have a sump pump down there. I have a battery that's hooked up, right? It's got the triple charger. So that's my backup there. Your cell phones, medication, make sure that you have enough of it. Make sure that if it needs to be refrigerated, you have a plan B, be it an ice chest, a neighbor's house, something like that. And get your blankets ready. Prepare for what could be a prolonged outage, even if it doesn't look like it's going to be a prolonged outage, and you won't find yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in. Have your emergency numbers. And
what are the emergency numbers, or how do they contact JCP&L if the power does go out, or if they're having an issue within their house and they say, that's just not right, I need someone's attention, right?
So power outage 188 lights with 2 S's is the number to report a power outage. You can also report through our website, jcpnl.com. You can navigate to our Facebook page, click the links there to get you to the same point. But it is important that our customers call in their outage. We're almost done deploying AMI smart meters throughout our service territory, but they operate off of a mesh communications network, meaning each one talks to the other and they operate in a repeating format. So until we're completely 100% out there, we're not going to be able to use all of the features that we will be able to use, like knowing when someone's power is out simply because their power went out. We just don't have that capability yet. We are ahead of schedule on deployment, so we're optimistic on that.
And certainly if our residents have an emergency, they can always dial 911
Always.
Specifically, and that's what we ask them to do.
And a couple more safety items while we're on the topic, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If you're going to interconnect a generator, please make sure that it's outside, away from windows, that sort of thing. Please make sure that it's wired properly. Generators can backfeed. So we may be working out on a circuit that we think is dead. A generator could be backfeeding it, create a hazardous situation right there.